Podcasting 101 with me, your host, Rachel. This podcast is for female business owners and solopreneurs that are looking to start a podcast that adds to your own already awesome offering. I'll give you helpful advice that you can take away and use in your podcasting journey. I hope to answer those tricky questions that just keep you from starting. Once a month, I'll be joined by other female podcasters. They'll share their journey with you and offer tips and advice they discovered along the way. Let's get started. Hi, and welcome to our first guest chat here on the Podcasting 101 with Rachel podcast. We're welcoming Gillian and Tamsin today. Hello, ladies.
Hello.
Hi.
Oh, it's lovely to have you here. Just as a little introduction to you both, Gillian and Tamsin are both anti-diet coaches, and they're on a mission to disrupt diet culture and help and support those who are looking to heal their relationship with their food and their body. Their podcast is called the Anit-Diet Podcast, and it goes without saying that I absolutely love the podcast. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about the podcast and about what you do?
Yeah, go for it, Tamsin.
Oh, thanks. Need him to know. It's the Anit-Diet Club Podcast, and we wanted to bring conversations around leaving diet culture behind, healing your relationship with food, body image stuff, dismantling weight bias and weight stigma. And we wanted to bring it into a conversational style podcast because we have lots of discussions between ourselves, and we wanted those conversations to be out there in the world for other people who are trying to work through some of this stuff and who may not be able to access coaching at this time, or group coaching or anything else like that. And we just wanted to use a platform to get the message out there and connect with other people who might be going through the same thing, might be having the same experiences. That's really kind of what is behind the podcast and the reason we do it.
It's a great reason. I think that podcasts like this need to be more in the forefront, especially at the moment. And it's something that hopefully become more mainstream. In the planning stages, what was going through your heads when you decided that you wanted to do a podcast? What were the next things that you did?
So after I sent Tamsin a message via WhatsApp to ask her if she would join me in this crazy venture of starting a podcast, we were exactly faced with that. How do you do it? How do you start a podcast? Because neither of us had ever done anything like this before. But we were avid podcast listeners. So we both knew what we liked in a podcast and what we didn't. And we also knew what our strengths were, right? We are not researchers. We're not academics. We're not therapists. Were coaches with real life experience. And we really just felt, as Tamsin said, the discussions we were already having, other people could benefit from hearing them. So that was really fairly easy to pin down the style. And then we had to look at what our strengths were. And from the outset, Tamsin said, I don't know anything about tech. Don't involve me in tech. And I didn't know, but I felt confident that I could, watch a few YouTube tutorials and kind of work out the basics. I was fairly happy with that. And Tamsin has a much greater enthusiasm and passion for social media than I do. So she was really happy to take that on. So that just seemed a really good, even distribution of labor between the two of us. And then I have a design background, so I was fairly specific on the kind of logo that I wanted. So I did that in Canva, set up templates for Tamsin to use. So it really all seemed very, hopefully Tamsin agrees, but fairly easy, just playing to our strengths and our style and our beliefs around what we talk about in the podcast are so similar that it just all kind of fell together pretty easily.
So you're pretty in step then. That obviously makes things a lot easier that you've got similar ideas, and especially for the design. Who's your target audience? And you talked a little bit about your goals in is your goal to make this kind of information accessible to people?
Yeah, so I think for us, when we were talking about it, we were trying to think about, well, who are we trying to reach? Like, who is the person that's going to be listening to this? And, it's a mixture really, but essentially when we were thinking about it in our mind, we were trying to think about it's somebody who is perhaps dipping the toe into anti-diet work and maybe dipping their toe into things like intuitive eating. Maybe they're thinking about, how to accept their bodies. Maybe they want to learn more about the social justice side of things, about dismantling diet culture and weight stigma and all that kind of stuff. But they haven't actually managed to do any work with anyone on it, or maybe that's not accessible to them, or perhaps it's not something that they actually want to do, but they're really interested in the subject. And I think, and hopefully Gillian agrees, this is why we wanted to keep it conversational. We wanted it to feel like you could almost be sitting next to us in a cafe and we were having this conversation about stuff and talking about the things that really kind of come up in real life, because we haven't had every lived experience, but we've had a lot of experience through clients. We've had a lot of experience through ourselves, a lot of experience through our training and our own research and understanding of all these subjects. So we bring a bit of everything into it. And if we haven't had the lived experience, we do the work to make sure that we are representing that lived experience as much as possible, or bringing a guest on and giving someone else a voice. And we have a variety of guests on, from people that we've, worked with before to people who are, really big names in the industry doing this kind of stuff in different guises. So yeah, basically it was just to try and make sure it was a relaxed conversation that people could just join in with. And it was structured around different topics that somebody might be struggling with. So they can look at the title and say, actually, yeah, I want to learn more about that, or I want help on that. But like I said, it was never going to be like tips. It was never going to be, statistics and all that kind of stuff. Like, we are just having a conversation and quite often just seeing how it unfolds.
Yeah, I think one of the things that you really felt quite passionately about at the start, Tamsin, and I think it was such a great move, podcasts for us have been really helpful in helping us understand topics better. But really what you were about was, I want people to feel less alone in this journey, right? Because when you're suffering with disordered eating and body shame, it's really lonely and it's really shame. People carry a lot of shame around the relationship with food in their bodies. And we really wanted just to bring these conversations out so that people felt seen and heard, and they could connect to these topics and really feel validated in that, and less lonely, like they're not weird, they're not broken. This is actually really common. There's so many people experiencing this, but it's not talked about. So that I think really, as Tamsin said, it wasn't about statistics and research. It was about, we get it, we've been there, and actually holding that hope for change.
It sounds like that was where you drew on to get your episodes as well. Is that how you planned out your episodes, in that frame of mind, with your person in mind, the kind of things that they would like to hear about or brought to the forefront? And did you also, how far ahead did you plan your episodes? Did you have an idea? Because I know you've done seasons and you're in season 2 now. So did you initially just plan out season 1 and then?
Yeah, we sat down, came up with, brainstormed a lot of the topics we wanted to talk about, and then narrowed that down, decided on how many episodes that we would put out for the first season. We've always been very kind of, this is flexible. We're not answering to anyone other than ourselves. Like, this is our decision, what we feel comfortable with. And the first thing that we did was made sure we recorded 3 episodes, I think it was, Gillian, wasn't it? We recorded 3. So we had 3 to start off with. So we almost had some in the bank. So we weren't then scrabbling around to try and do the next one. We decided on the drumbeat of when we would record, and we planned it. We planned it really well, but to not to the point where we were exhausted. We're like, does this fit in with our life? Can we fit this in around our work? Can we, how much time is all this going to take up? Because, everything from the editing, as you know, to having the podcast handle and, putting out posts each week about that and advertising it and posting that on our own handles. And and I think having guests in season 2 added in like another layer. And I'm glad we didn't jump into that in season 1, because it helped us kind of find our feet, find our voice, get used to doing the things that we don't. There are bits that we both sort of don't love. For me, it's intros, which we always laugh about because I hate them, and tech, and I like can't even use my mic half the time. So it's kind of, it's just gave us the breathing space to go, let's find our voice, let's find our feet, and then we'll get braver as we go on. So like season 2 is about us being brave, about having guests, and we've got some things we've learned about that, but it's working well so far. But we are planners, definitely, I would say.
Mm-hmm. I think planning is an important part of your podcast. I know that if you don't plan, then you could end up scrabbling around trying to find your episodes. I think batching is a brilliant idea. I'm going to do that myself with my episodes, the solo ones that we're having, and try and get the interviews in, because I think that as well, life just happens and we're all business owners as well. So we all have our own things to deal with. So having that planning stage, the planning in place, is critical to the success of the podcast. What was the challenges with that when you decided to like fitting it around your schedule? Did you find it difficult to fit that in, or did it work? Obviously, I know it's all worked out in the end because you're in season 2 and it's going really well. But, initially, was it hard to decide on, like, did you have any specific length of the episodes, or did you have any recording conflicts or?
Yeah, I think we set aside the same time of the same day every week. Friday morning, we agreed would be our podcast morning. And we have learned a lot as time has gone on. We've kind of went through a phase of sort of trying to really, so when Tamsin was saying we plan the episodes, we plan, we know when we're going to be recording, we know what the episodes are, we know the sequence of them, but we went through a stage where we were trying to kind of micro plan what we were going to talk about within the episode. And that didn't go massively well for us. In fact, one episode, I think we recorded 3 times because because it just, we were trying to check all the boxes in terms of like getting everything covered on that topic. And are we doing this? And are we addressing this issue? And are we, having these people be seen in this episode? And it became kind of stagnant and kind of boring, and it wasn't really us. So even though we have a really good structure to work with, I would say when we come to actually a couple of bullet points written down that we want to cover, but it's pretty spontaneous. And we feel that works best for us. I am a perfectionist in recovery, so I find it quite hard sometimes because I'm the editor of the podcast. So listening back to a conversation, it's hard sometimes to think, I didn't quite say that the way that I wanted to say it, or, we forgot to do this part. For me, in trying to just let go, and done is better than perfect. And Tamsin's great at that. I couldn't ask for a better co-host, because she's always the reminder to say, we did a great job. We might not have our all bases covered, but it's really good enough. Let's get it done. So when I'm having a lot of doubts of anything, she's always the kind of one that brings it back to reality for me. So it's a good dynamic. But other than my perfectionism and Tamsin, she's mentioned the intros she struggles with. So we're kind of testing out right now pre-recorded intros and outros, which is new for us. We've never done that before. But so much of it is experimentation. And ultimately what we're going to land with is just what feels most natural for us and easiest for us, because that's going to be what's most sustainable.
That's a really good point about testing. And, even if you have your podcast planned out, I think it's important to know that it can evolve into something different. Or, when I first started my first podcast, the Virtually Inspiring one, I just wanted to kind of dive in and do a podcast. And that was the subject that I settled on. And as time has gone on, now I realise maybe I need to go in a different direction. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that necessarily. And I think, like you're saying, you've got a different style. Everybody learns. It's the same with the social media and your marketing. I guess that you all evolve with your podcast, and it's great to keep a little bit of flexibility in there rather than potentially sticking rigidly to something that might not be working for you or for your audience, that you have that ability to be able to, give yourself some leeway there.
I think it's a bit like social media when you kind of get hung up on your like colors or your branding or whatever. You start doing something in a certain way, or you want to change like what you're called or something. You think in your mind that people are going to really like notice, or they're going to like think, you know, you've done a U-turn. Actually, nobody really does notice at all. I think it helps you kind of, when you're doing it for what feels authentic to you, it helps you keep going. I think when you're doing it because you think it's what somebody wants, but you don't have that you don't have that verification, that validation that is what they want, you're just kind of doing something that's not right for you. And like Gillian said, you know, when we tried to script anything, I think what we were trying to do in that instance was to not have the conversation. We started talking about it before we recorded, but then we found that we had like the best of our conversation. We got the best of ourselves. By the time we hit record, we were fatigued. We'd been talking for like an hour, 2 hours sometimes. And then we were like running out of time. Then it was, we just had to say, no, that this is not working. We need to be more confident in our own knowledge, our own experience, and our own ability to have these great conversations, and just be better at kind of cutting bits out if they don't work for us, rather than trying to have the perfect conversation straight off the bat. And it seems we're in a flow now. And I feel like if she says to me tomorrow, let's just jump on and record something, I will go, yeah, fine, let's do it.
Yeah. There is a thing about, you know, the option for people to script their episodes or to have them as notes. I prefer to, with the solo ones, I've got some kind of areas that like I want to cover. But I think that you're right that you can't, if you get too rigid if I get too rigid in that, then you're trying to include everything, then it then doesn't feel very natural. And I suppose it depends on the style of your podcast and what you're actually doing for your podcast as well, I think, the subject. So it's something to consider, and you have to go with what works best for you, rather than trying to shoehorn yourself into doing a script when actually it's not the right thing to do, because it can take a long time to really read a script and make it sound conversational and natural. I mean, it's like a bit like, I mean, I'm absolutely no actor, and I guess you'd have to kind of be, I mean, some people might be really great at it and that would be brilliant, but yeah, it's
we weren't good at it.
Yeah, I'm not good
at
it.
No, there's no right way with any of this stuff.
No, I think
it feels more natural when you find what works for you. And if it works for you to have like bullet points or notes, or even having a script, is fine. It's just, it didn't work for us because it was just making us really stilted, and it's just not how we are.
Yeah. And it doesn't, particularly when you bring guests in, right? It doesn't allow for the kind of fluidity of the conversation, because you're so worried about like, how do I get this next question in, as opposed to being really present in what the actual conversation is at the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're still kind of learning that as we go.
But I think that's just a big thing that people have to also get over with doing your podcast, that there are things that you may not get right as well, and that those things shouldn't stop you from starting your podcast or trying things out. So you've talked a little bit about the tech side of things, which you've mastered, Gillian. What kind of things, I know you talked about, Tamsin, you handle the social media kind of things. What kind of things or posts do you use to promote your podcast?
So on the social media handle, we decided we wanted to have one, and we decided we wanted to have a logo and everything. And Gillian's so great with the design stuff, was I will spend about 4 hours in Canva coming up with something really shameful. So I just left that to Gillian. But what happened is we created this kind of like drumbeat of, you know, when it's like podcast episode launch week, we will put out a teaser post to say what's coming up on the Tuesday. Our podcast goes out every other week on a Thursday. And then on the Thursday that the podcast is aired, we put out a post with a sound to it. And we do that every time. And then the week where we haven't got an episode coming out, we have a quote from the podcast. And then on the Thursday, which is like we have of that week where we're not having an episode coming out, we just have like an engagement post, and we chat to the community about maybe what they want to hear, or we talk about something. And yeah, that we've kind of kept that going, and we're just growing it really slowly. It wasn't the be all and end all, but we wanted to have that because we're not in business together. We have our own separate businesses. We just wanted to have this like joint podcast handle that we could then share stuff from, so we can share it to our own social media accounts, and that's no problem. But yeah, having those things set up in Canva with all those different posts means that I can just go into Canva. It's like, that you can share on Teams within Canva, and I can just go in and edit them, and then I can just get on with it, and I can just post them. Occasionally I might WhatsApp it to Gillian and say, you happy with this, if I'm not sure. But generally speaking, yeah, we try to keep it simple. We try to keep like a same drumbeat. We probably don't use stories enough. We used to post like our bloopers and stuff in the beginning, but we don't really have any of those now. They were so fun.
Oh my God, the bloopers are hilarious.
Have them now.
We don't anymore.
We don't. And there's like, there'll be a cat coming in as Marvin.
You should do a reels. You should do like batch some reels of it.
Yeah, we have. I think that's probably something we haven't really ventured into, is like doing, there's loads more we could do with the social media side, but at the moment it's manageable. And this is the thing that we kind of keep bringing ourselves back to, is what is manageable.
Yeah.
Because if we start doing like loads of stories all the time, there'll be times when we can't do that, and then it sort of falls on its face.
Keeping the consistency up with what you want to achieve.
This is how we're comfortable doing it. And then we will always share the artwork with the people we have on. If we have guests, we share it on our own handles. I share it. We have the podcast linked on our websites.
Mm-hmm.
So you can actually listen to the episodes through our website, which was something we've done recently. And I share it everywhere, LinkedIn, in our newsletters. We just kind of, we don't have a thing where each person has to do something, but we quite often will think, I suddenly realized yesterday, actually I can put it on LinkedIn. Why not? So I started doing that. And it's just, sharing.
Or email signature. Do you have it in your email signature?
I do, actually. I do.
Yeah, I need to update all mine when this is released. Yeah. So a little link in your email signature is a good one.
Yeah,
it sounds like you're marketing it in all the right places. That what I recommend to my clients and what I do for myself is what you do with the quote, an engagement post, and a launch day post, and the audiograms. I love the audiograms. I was really into doing those. Do you use Canva for those, or do you use a different app?
Yeah, all our design stuff is in Canva.
It's in Canva.
And we've worked out how to do it just about. We wanted to do it a different way. We couldn't work it out. So we're like, right, do you know what? We need to just get this out. So it's one of those things. It's like, do we faff about with the design of this forever? Or do we just get it out to a point where we're happy? And we're happy with it now. And we have a set schedule. We have set colors. That's our branding colors specifically for the podcast. That's completely unlinked to our own branding colors on our own businesses. It's totally different. But yeah, it's, we do everything in Canva really, just because.
I use Canva a lot. I find it really hard for audiograms though. I did one. I couldn't get the waveform that I wanted. So I use Headliner app, and I designed the static graphic in Canva, and then I upload it to Headliner, and then you can choose the waveform, and then you can also do the subtitles in there as well.
Yeah, I couldn't make that work.
No.
So I had the same problem. I wanted the different waves, and then I found a way to just kind of make it look like it was moving.
But I was looking at it this morning. I was like, how have you worked out to
for anyone listening
who's
having a problem with doing this audio file in Canva and you want to do it in Canva, my top tip is you have to trim the clip that you want. You have to trim it down to about less than 10 minutes or less, and have that, because if you try and upload the entire audio file to Canva, it completely crashes it and it just can't cope, and you can't then decide which clip you want. So I tend to select or Gillian will cut it down for me depending, or I'll do it myself, and then it will just go in instantly and it will upload instantly and I can use it properly. But it's just getting, because I only use like less than a minute of that audio file for an Instagram post.
Yeah, because I tend to do, in Headliner, you can only upload up to 10 minutes as well, but I tend to do around 30 seconds to a minute for an audiogram. But I'll cut my clip in, I use Audacity to edit. So when I'm going through doing the show notes and everything, I'll find what I want to use and I'll put it on a separate file and export it so I can just put it in easy. Otherwise, I think sometimes some of the editors or clippers in different softwares are quite hard to use. And if you're already editing anyway, then you can easily kind of get those clips.
Yeah. Out of interest, super easy.
Yeah. What do you use for your editing software? Just out of interest.
iMovie.
iMovie. Okay.
Yeah.
I
it's just the only thing I vaguely knew how to use. And there's tons of YouTube tutorials. And I still don't feel like I think if somebody who really knew what they were doing watched me do it, they'd be thinking, oh my God, you're doing it completely like the long way around. But, you know, it works and it's familiar now and easy. So yeah.
Well, that's what's important. Yeah, it is. I've got a little bit of background. When I was at university, I did some editing and things. So when I came back to it now, and my husband's a sound engineer and he's like super helpful. So he like really helps me, with a lot of the software. So that was quite handy. Yeah. Now I'm like trying to bat him off and go, no, I need to do it myself. I got to work it on myself. So I was very pleased the other day when I was working something out and I did it all by myself. So there's a lot of tutorials as well for some of it, because it's this, they can do so much from the editing software. And even, there are people that know Audacity way better than I know it. And there are so many different things you can do. So it's quite nice to discover something sometimes that you haven't known is possible. But
I think the tech side of things could be something that would put someone like me off.
Yeah.
But I think knowing that you can keep it simple and you don't have to kind of jump through a lot of hoops to do it, I think is helpful. And I think because we're keeping it like a conversational style, we're not editing out every last thing. I think that helps.
Yeah, that does help. I was thinking about that the other day. Hannah and Nicole, who do the Showing Up Solo podcast that I edit as well, they like to keep it conversational. They like to keep some of their mistakes in. I think that, or not mistakes, or if your phone pings or anything like that, because part of their marketing that they're doing is about showing up, and you don't have to be perfect to show up. And I think that is really important. Everybody has a standard to what they, want to, and I want this to sound great. But if it's going to be a big barrier for you, there are ways that you can do it. That to start with, you can just get your podcast out there, you're doing it, because that can be a kind of excuse, the tech, or I don't know how to do this. I'm just going to use that to delay everything. And it is a journey as well, like we were talking about earlier, everything evolving and learning, that if you it can be such a beneficial experience and beneficial for your business and kind of streamline all your marketing to have a podcast that you shouldn't let something like that. And like the microphones, I've got a lovely microphone now. But when I first started, my husband had he had an old like radio mic that I borrowed, and that sounded fine. Or you can have the headphones with your mic in that you get with your phone. So those kind of things you can still use to start with, and then invest as you decided to think, actually, now I do want to invest in that. And, so I think that it is an important point to make, that people should just plan it and then dive in. I'm not a complete monster. You have to plan something, but then you go and then dive in. But there is, once you've done the planning, you should just, it is nerve-wracking starting. That was kind of what was holding me back when I first did mine, because I planned it all and done all this, but I still was that bit about, have I got this right? Have I got that right? Like the perfectionist in me, Gillian. Yeah. And I was a bit like, well, I've just got to do it. And then kind of, so I'm glad I did.
I think, although Tamsin's right, I do look at the stats a lot to see downloads, and I'm really interested in the countries in which people tune in from. When Tamsin and I sit down to record, in my mind, it's like no one's going to be listening to this. It's just a conversation. Like, I hope obviously it reaches a lot of people and it lands with them. But if I start to think of, all the hundreds of people that's listening to it, I think I'd get pretty overwhelmed. So it's nice to just think that it's just her and me having this conversation, and then it goes out into the world. And I think that's one of the biggest things I've learned from this podcast thing is, the more fun that we have and the less attached to the outcome, the more I'm likely to show up and do it and continue to do it, as opposed to having these really, really firm kind of attached outcomes. We had no idea. We really just thought it would be our mums that would listen to the podcast. Turns out my mum doesn't listen to the podcast, but other people do.
I think neither of our mums have ever listened to it. My mum said to me the other day, how many likes have you had on your podcast? It's like, listens, mum, listens. You just no.
Yeah, it can feel, I've always kind of done mine with the thought that, that nobody's listening, or if I just get like one listener or one person that I could have helped from this, then that's amazing. And we were talking about it before we press record, but you've got nearly 2,000 listens now on your podcast, which is amazing.
Yeah, that's right. With only, I think, what are we on, 12 episodes, 13 episodes?
Just gone through 12,
Yeah, that's a fantastic achievement. And I guess, and it is a testament to the hard work that you've put in the planning stages, in recognizing exactly what your audience will want to hear and what is going to resonate with them, and that planning in making sure that you're going to cover the topics that you feel is going to resonate with your audience. And obviously it has, because you've got, you know, the evidence there that there's 2,000 listens, that what you're doing is really resonating with people who are listening. And I myself love the podcast, and it definitely resonates with me as well. So, you know, one person definitely. Do you have any kind of last bits of advice you'd offer to anybody starting a podcast?
My top tip of advice would be, don't worry about what your voice sounds like, because no one cares. You won't care after a while. You can get over that pretty quickly. But the other thing is, if you're thinking of having guests on, just like reach out to whoever you actually want on. Don't ever, we've been really brave about who we've asked to come onto the podcast, and we're like, well, they might say no, and that's fine. But you'll find that most people say yes. In fact, every single person that we asked in the first season 2 has said yes. We've got them all either recorded or booked in, because people want to come and talk about their stuff. It's unusual, I think, you know, for people not to want to, but if they don't, it's not anything to do with you. It may be just time schedule, but if you don't ask, you don't get. And we've really, really reached out to lots of people in our industry, and we've just reached out to everyone we've wanted, haven't we? We think about it. And I think just don't get put off by whoever you might want. If you really want them on your podcast and you think they can add value to your listeners, then do it. Just ask.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you've been really brave, I have to say, between the two of us, in terms of like, let's just go for it. You know, what's the worst that can happen? My top tip would definitely be on the tech side, and just like, don't let that trip you up. It's just a learned skill. That's all it is. It's I think that if you've got a message to share, your voice is important. That's the important part, getting that out into the world, to be of service to people, to share your experience and your knowledge. The tech side is just something that is necessary, but can be learned. And if you can't do it, then maybe find somebody who can do it, but don't let that be the stumbling block, because the most important thing is that you get your work out there into the world.
That's great advice. Thank you both so much for coming on and for being my first guests on the podcast. Do you want to just let us know where we can find the podcast and also your businesses?
So the Instagram handle is the Anit-Diet Club Podcast, and you can find the podcast on all the usual places: Apple, Spotify, Anchor, Google. And I'm Gillian McCollum. That's what my business is called. So my website's just gillianmccollum.com, and my Instagram handle's the same, Gillian McCollum. So yeah, thanks for having us, Rachel.
Yeah, you can find me. I'm at Tamsin Broster Coaching on Instagram, and my website is just my name. It's tamsinbroster.co.uk. Yeah, it's been great. It's been great to actually talk about something slightly different than our actual podcast. It's like talking about the actual process of it. It's been great.
Yeah, well, thanks for coming on. I'll link all of the information in the show notes as well, so that people can find you easily. And yeah, thanks again. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks so much for listening. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please like, share and subscribe. Your support means so much to me. If there's a question or topic you'd like covering, then I'd love to hear from you. Find the podcast on Instagram at Rachie Botfield and drop me a DM. Till next time, bye.